Hi everyone. I wanted to make a video regarding my views to date, as of this current date, of MGTOW, of being a man going his own way, in general, of us, men, going our own way, in light of recent discussions and videos on, for example, the distinction between feminism as an ideology and women as a distinct gender from that ideology, and so on and so forth. Now, I think we can all remember the landmark statement that Barbarossa made in one of his earlier videos, where he essentially says, and I'm paraphrasing, that men are but a blowjob away from jumping ship. And I've seen some comments and commenters, and I am getting the impression across the board, all over the internet, from many different comments made by men, that most men, either interested in MGTOW or considering themselves to be such, are lacking in intellectual commitment. You see, I view MGTOW as a concept which entails a commitment to intellectual honesty. It's not about being bitter, and it's not about hate, although I'm sure we can see the comment section often enough that those claims and charges are leveled at us all the time. What it's about is really understanding the nature of human beings, both males and females, to the benefit of men. Because men do not receive this education and do not receive this information when they're growing up. They don't understand what's going on around them, and I see it as an almost obligation on my part, because I do believe I understand these concepts fairly well, and the ongoings between men and women, to present that information to the best of my ability in an effort to help men. I do not hate women. Now, it is entirely possible that someone might become a so-called man going his own way, and I'm using this term so-called simply because of so-called bad experiences, once again, so-called, in relationships. We've all had bad experiences in relationships. The difference between simply going your own way because of bitterness, with a fundamental lack of understanding of the concepts that involve being a man going your own way, which to my mind, the most important element of being a man going your own way is not the renunciation of women or the renunciation of whatever. It's that very, very important understanding of the relationship of the human female to the human male, what she expects of that male, and ultimately realizing by dint of collecting data, reading information, and synthesis and internalization, that the human female, in the sense of a relationship, or in the sense of the propaganda that we've been spoon-fed since birth, is not compatible. It doesn't mean you cannot draw on data from past relationships. Now, I've mentioned in the past, and it's true, that many, many years ago I was in a relationship with a violent female. Now, perhaps at the time or shortly thereafter I was somewhat bitter, but I'm not bitter about it now. And in the subsequent years, what did I do? I learned from it. And how? Well, I was in a relationship with a violent female, and so I looked up some statistics and some data on domestic violence, on violence in women. And lo, to my surprise, what did I discover? Well, that women are just as violent in relationships as men are, if not more so in some cases. Of course, that conclusion was aided a little bit by the incredulity of the police when I went to the police at the time, but that's neither here nor there. So, just because you've had bad experiences in relationships doesn't mean, in becoming a MGTOW, or a man going your own way, doesn't mean that you're simply bitter. No, you gather information from these relationships, and you can apply it to the analyses that you're making based on the data that you've gathered, and based on the information that you've sought, and based on your readings and your understanding of the world at large. It's not just my relationships, but the relationships of others, of friends, of well, you can read any tabloid magazine, you can see what's going on. But that's neither here nor there. So I firmly believe that men going their own way as a concept entails a firm commitment to the truth, an intellectual commitment to the truth, the willingness to state how things are rather than how they ought to be or how they're supposed to be. And men who are simply calling themselves such or sort of affiliated with it, I wish them no. I have harbor no ill wishes towards them. But I think if you are going to be part of the sort of intellectual concept of a man going your own way, then you really need to look at some of the facts out there and do your best to understand what's going on. That understanding is key, ultimately, in my humble opinion. Because, as Barbarossa stated many times, it's not about hating women, it's about understanding them and then making the best out of that situation, out of that understanding for yourself as an individual male. There's another element to this. I'm certainly believe in being very supportive of my fellow men, and recall one of to my mind Barbarossa's greatest video, titled, I believe, "Traditional View Leads to Parasitic Relationships," something along those lines, where he states that if we realize these things, maybe it's not probable, but it's possible that instead of climbing over each other to get to the top all the time, we might decide to help each other out. And so that's the purpose of this channel. I've stated it before, and I also try to do that in real life to the extent that I can. So I think that those two elements are key: the desire to help men on an individual basis, but also that commitment to rigorous commitment to intellectual honesty. Let's not fool ourselves. The world is afloat with well-meaning fairy tales of all manner and all sorts, and myths that are told and continue to be told in an effort to assuage our fears, to make us feel better about the reality we live in. And indeed, they can. Sometimes I come to the conclusion that delusion, mass delusion, and the illusions that lead to that delusion are a requirement for some people. For whatever reason, these people lack the capacity to accept the truth on its own terms. So, intellectual commitment, and to what, specifically within the sphere of being a man going your own way? Well, let's be frank. As Barbarossa has very clearly stated, and I'm in 100% agreement with him on this, simply stating that feminism is an ideology and women are a gender explains nothing to the individual male. And one has to be either blind or stupid, or both, and I don't think most people are that stupid to simply brush over, to gloss over the complicity of the female hand in all the things, the ongoings of the modern era, be it divorce, domestic violence charges, be it the victim narrative. We've seen this, for example, with the Anita Sarkeesian, the so-called feminist frequency, the not-so-good channel about, what does she call it, tropes, typical tropes about females. She played the victim. And what happened when she played the victim was that she made even more money. And unfortunately, as Barbarossa has also stated, making many references to his most recent video, victimhood is power. How did we see this with Anita Sarkeesian? We saw it very clearly. MRAs, men of all sorts, wrote comments, and she was, because of these comments, whether they were misconstrued or misinterpreted or whatever, those comments led to her being able to create a victim narrative. And that is the ultimate power of politicized feminism, and ultimately it is the power of the individual female, the lowercase f feminist, if you will, the individual woman. When all else fails, you cry, one cries crocodile tears in an effort to garner sympathy from the surroundings and the people in those surroundings. And that's what Anita Sarkeesian did. and she came off from that victim narrative with a hefty sum. I only wish I had that much money. So, commitment to the truth, calling things what they are rather than what they should be or what they're supposed to be. To my mind, that is very important. We simply cannot overlook the complicity of your everyday average woman in this mess we call feminism, if you will, and say that, well, feminism is an ideology and women are a gender, and that's true, in as much as, I mean, semantically speaking, that is true, but feminism and the typical female typically exist in a symbiotic relationship. They exist in a symbiotic relationship to each other, and that relationship is very difficult to break. Most women do not self-identify as feminists, but bring up something about selective service or father's rights or reproductive rights, or anything. Take your pick, and you will hear a lot of loud caterwauling, I assure you. So we need to be clear about things moving ahead, I think, in general. This is not placing blame on women, but we cannot elude the facts and the information out there that women are initiating, say, the vast majority of divorces, and of course we who are wise are not going to get married, but no one is putting a gun to their head. And speaking of guns being put to people's heads, most recently I was listening to a new episode, or I believe the most recent episode of A Voice for Men, about what are the feminists afraid of. And there were two calls that somewhat intrigued me. I'm not going to name names, but there was a very young caller, a boy of 15 years, 15 winters, who's called in before, and he seems to be quite astute and aware of these things, feminism specifically, and double standards. And then another caller called in after him, and there was some discussion, and he made the comment that something to the effect of, I don't hate women, but I hate the gun they've been given. Now, we're way past hatred. We don't hate anything. We're just looking at things in a sobering tone, if you will, objectively. But the question I'd like to ask that gentleman, and to people who believe that it's women and the gun have no relationship to each other, if we were to extend that metaphor, and let's say that men with that metaphorical gun are being shot by women using the gun that they've been endowed with, do the women firing the gun, firing the shots, killing the men with that gun, do the women bear responsibility for their actions? Or have they been coerced? Have they been cajoled? Have they been tricked? Have they been deceived by the leftists and the Marxists and the socialists? Have they been deceived by the great ideology feminism? I think not. If we are to further extend the analogy with the gun, quite simply, the woman with the gun has the responsibility for wielding that weapon. If she chooses to shoot it, then the responsibility rests squarely in her lap. And that's something we should never forget. And furthermore, the gentleman made some comments regarding the young man, the boy who called in. When he comes of age, how is he going to be able to date women? How is he going to be able to interact with them? Without there will be no trust, and so on and so forth. Feminism did this. Well, what I've tried to do on this channel, and what Barbarossa has done long before me, is to elucidate what seems to be quite more or less the fact that the relationship that we have been spoon-fed, that were the concept, the image of the relationship we've been spoon-fed since birth, has never been. It has always been chimerical in nature. And dispelling that chimera, we know that for very simple reasons, because the human female views the human male primarily as a resource provider, and put more simply, it's not about who he is, but rather what he can do for her, that there is no basis for trust, and there can never be a basis for trust in that regard. So it's kind of a moot point that the gentleman brought up. How can he ever trust women? The reason why men were allegedly, and I do say allegedly, able to trust women at an earlier stage in the game, in this game of life and history, is because there were societal constraints and civilizational taboos on certain forms of female behavior, out of wedlock children, hypergamy expressing itself to the extent that it has done in the modern era, for example. No. And men were, of course, still beasts of burden, but they had some authority, even though they would also receive the blame and responsibility for actions taken by their wives. So women were, in fact, restrained by this. And it is interesting, of course, that in antiquity, men, you often read quotes and sayings and phrases in literature, men were keenly aware of female nature in this regard. They were aware of female hypergamy, and they were aware of women's willingness to manipulate men to fulfill their hypergamous needs. It seems we've forgotten all of that. And, of course, having lost that knowledge, essentially, having had that knowledge totally obscured and obfuscated by, say, the previous 5 or 6 decades, in a way, we're not doing anything new. We're simply, well, we're archaeologists, if you will. We're digging up the remains of the past, and it's all there. Remember, you can often read a lot about past civilizations from, well, simply pottery, and there's a lot of pottery to be dug up in this case. So we don't need to lie to ourselves anymore, and that's what I mean by intellectual commitment. I honestly believe that if men are simply in it because they've gotten dicked over by women, and many men have, that's not enough. It requires an intellectual commitment and a desire to understand the world. And I know I speak for myself, and I'm quite certain I speak for Barbarossa in this regard. I know he's basically a scientist. He's studied many sciences, and I've studied various subjects. I've always been fascinated by the workings of the world at large. And to me, this is, of course, the greatest, one, the greatest lie ever told, but two, also, in some way, not a very sobering way, the most fascinating aspect of the human being in this modern age. What exactly is the dynamic that exists between the male and the female, and why does it always seem that, despite all the privilege that we are accorded, allegedly, we somehow get the short end of the stick, the short end of the straw? Well, we know why that's the case now. So it is an intellectual commitment to honesty. How do I know that many men, be they MRAs or calling themselves men going their own way, are not committed? Well, you just need to take a glance at the comment section in some of videos that are all around, all over YouTube. I'll take a look at an older video by Mr Elam. Let me just read off 2 comments made by 2 separate gentlemen. So Vice891 writes, "What if, as a man, you'd rather that chivalry lived and men were unequal? I gain a sense of pride and confidence from acting like a gentleman, and I don't want to give that up, just so I can see women on the front lines, which I don't want, and men having a say in abortion." Then, another one, Once Was a, "Hey, I respect you, Mr. Elam, but I kind of do like chivalry. I was raised to pay deference to women, to show them respect, open doors, etc., and I am proud to be chivalrous. And I don't want women going to war. I don't want male-female equality. I want them to be complementary. Women in the home, men in the workplace. No more misandry in the media, men respected in marriage and society. No more no fault, or my body, my choice, or slut-shaming, or bad. You get it. Would you like that more?" And Mr Elam rather wittily and sharply responded, "Nope, I do not want to support a woman. If I want a maid, I will hire one," which basically echoes my thoughts on that matter. I have no desire to lord over women. I never had. Even when I still existed within the matrix, as we like to call it, I had no desire to lord over women. I did not want to be a patriarch, because at that time, in the years of that previous incarnation, I honestly believed that men and women were somehow some fashion equal, or they actually desired, or they should be accorded the same desires and rights as I should within a relationship. That's neither here nor there. The point being that I've never had the tyrannical desire to boss women around, and I think a lot of these men who are supposedly in the MRA, or men going their own way, really do harbor that desire. They want to tell women what to do, which I don't agree with, and they want them to put them in their place. And remember, these guys don't want to see women on the battlefield. Both of them said that they want to see men dying. They didn't say it, but that's what they want to see. They don't have a problem with it. And if they don't have a problem with it, then I have no issues claiming that that's actually what they want to see. So many men, I think a great deal of men, are really in that stage. They want to repair relationships. Well, the relationship has always been broken, gentlemen. It's never been this pristine vision that you've been fed all your lives. It's sometimes when I think of these chivalrous men and the way they look at the relationship between men and women, they don't almost has religious overtones. The female is the Madonna, some sort of goddess, and you are to pay deference to that goddess. She's not to, she's not to receive a scratch on her skin. She must be maintained in her divine form no matter what. Of course, you, being the mortal priest, being the mortal servant, you can do all the dirty work. So, what I see going forward is definitely that we need to openly make clear that being a man going your own way definitely, most certainly entails this commitment to intellectual honesty, to the truth, to understanding the nature of things, specifically the nature between the male and the female, for the express purpose of helping men navigate these choppy waters. And they are, well, choppy is a bit euphemistic. I think we're caught in a raging torrent. And men who are not prepared, they don't have the paraphernalia with them to somehow escape that torrent, they will be sucked in and they will drown. And they are drowning in great numbers even as I speak. So for the young caller called in, I think ultimately, if he is perceptive and perspicacious, he'll see that it's a lot more complicated than feminism as an ideology and women are a gender. It's a lot more complicated than that, and if we want to be honest with ourselves and with the world, I think we can't simply let it rest at that. We can't let it just be. So I will continue in forthcoming work to point out relentlessly, if necessary, that whilst feminism, capital F feminism, is an ideology, capital F feminism has no power without lowercase f feminism. That is the everyday common women who empower it, who give it power. Barbaros is spot on, quite right. He hit the nail on the head when he said that feminism, politicized feminism, is a female advocacy group. Supremacy, generally speaking, has very little to do with it. They want women themselves specifically to have lots of privileges, and the women who are not declared feminists take advantage of those privileges. I mean, who wouldn't? In a future video, I'd like to address the question of equality. Do women want equality? Furthermore, more importantly, do men even want equality for women? As a glance at the comment section of some of these videos can show rather readily and quickly, I don't think a lot of men even want equality for women, and I don't think women really want it either. Anyway, I think that's all I had to say about the subject, but I did want to make this video because I think it is very true. Restating what I said, it's about an intellectual commitment to the truth and an intellectual commitment to understanding the way things really are, as opposed to sort of attempting to pretzelize the narrative that we've been told. And to be honest, ultimately, this idea that feminism is simply an ideology that exists independently of the female, and women are a gender, and they bear very little relationship to each other. That is a form of reality pretzelization, if you will. That is very clearly a pretzelization. It's not simply not the case. Remember, Remember the metaphor. This gentleman doesn't hate women, but he hates the gun that they've been given. Women are choosing to make use of that wield that weapon, to wield the gun, and shoot men with it, metaphorically speaking. And we can't forget that. So not for the sake of hatred, but for the sake of protecting men, protecting male interests, and also to give men a greater sense of dignity and personal value, because we all know how valuable we are in this world. We need to continue telling men the truth as it is. No more lies, no more conflation, and I certainly am not going to pretzelize on this channel. Anyway, have a pleasant day, afternoon, or evening, and take care.